Greetings, ghouls, and welcome to another spooky episode of Knitting Time with Willie. Ooh, ooh. I'm your creepy host, Willie Muse, joined as always by my co-host, Nitcolis. And today, in honor of the spooky season, I will be discussing the single most terrifying, blood-curdling, spine-tingling episode in the history of America's Next Top Model. Ooh! So just what makes this episode so scary, you may be wondering? Well, I really wish you hadn't just asked me that because I don't really have a good answer. I was kind of hoping doing those ghost noises would distract you enough that you wouldn't question anything, but I kind of have a feeling that it didn't work out that way. Ooh. Truth is that it's October, and so I figured I should have a Halloween episode of something, but my turnaround time on these videos is so nebulous that I honestly don't know how many chances I'll have to get one out. My next video is going to be about a super scary kids movie because, well, that actually does make sense as the subject of a Halloween episode, and, well, I sure do hope that I can get it up before the month of October is over. But based on the schedule I set for myself, this next video I put out was supposed to be about Top Model, and since there's also a solid chance it'll be the only video I'm able to make before the month is over, I figured I might as well just fudge it by turning my Freddy Krueger sweater into a Freddy Krueger costume and doing my best to try and pretend like the episode I'm about to talk about has anything to do with Halloween, even though it doesn't. It really does not. I mean, I guess you could argue that every episode of ANTM is pretty terrifying, but it's terrifying in more of like a concerning way than a spooky way. Other than that, I don't know, I guess there are clowns in this episode. Clowns are kind of scary. Sometimes. The ones in this episode aren't particularly scary, but sometimes they are, so that's kind of Halloween-y, I guess. I don't know, I feel like I should just start talking, and maybe if I just keep saying stuff, I'll eventually figure out a reason to justify calling this one a Halloween episode. So with that in mind, let's get started by talking about Season 6, Episode 7, The Girl with the Temper. Ooh. I don't know. I guess since this is knitting time with Willie, I should still knit. Just not sure how I'm going to. All right. Okay. I do not know how Freddy does this. You know what? I think I'm just going to take this off. Okay, that's much better. That was a terrible way to start the episode. Let's take that again, shall we? The episode starts off with another lesson from Miss J, which are always fun because I feel like the things that she teaches are the sort of things that people who don't know much about modeling look at and think, wait, you needed a class for that? Like today, she's giving a crash course in accessories, which, like to me personally, the idea that you can stretch the topic of accessories out to the length of a whole class is kind of insane, but, well, I guess that's why Miss J is just a much better person than I am. Like, not only does she manage to make it work, but she manages to turn it into a class that actually looks pretty difficult. Like I'm not even joking, I'm pretty sure I would fail. The focus of it is how to smoothly balance walking on a runway with showing accessories, and like everything Miss J does, it's genuinely interesting to see someone so knowledgeable about stuff that I would never even think to consider. Like, she gives a lot of solutions to problems that I never even knew existed in a way that's actually pretty cool.
You're unbuttoning a jacket, it's easier to do it from the bottom up, because your hands automatically up here, and you can just come out of it.
Although that said, I think there's a solid chance that the mere existence of Miss J's lesson could also be making the problems he's trying to solve much worse.
When you have gloves,
like, I feel like if I wasn't thinking and someone told me to take off gloves while I walked, I would probably be able to do it no problem. But if someone told me a specific way to take my gloves off while I walked, I feel like I'd probably end up tripping and then peeing myself before ultimately bursting into flames somehow. Like, it definitely seems like the girls are in their heads a little bit, trying to do the stuff the way Miss J told them to, and that leads to some very fun B-roll of them struggling to take off jackets.
ouch. You have to be quick. You just messy, Tressie messy, Leslie just get back, go on.
Which, like, again, I have no doubt that everything they're doing is a lot harder than it seems, but it's still very fun to watch people fail so spectacularly at things that seem very, very easy on paper. Jay ends the lesson by telling the girls that, well, they're going to have another lesson, and he sets up the next segment of the episode by saying this.
Today we learned about movement with gloves and accessories, but you still need to step it up a couple of notches. So today you're gonna go meet the Twirlers. So girls, good luck, because you have double the trouble.
And hearing him say that, I feel the need to take a moment to stop and take a step back so we can appreciate just how bizarre this show is. Watching an episode of America's Next Top Model, it's very easy to get swept into the world of it, and when that happens, you can sometimes lose sight of just how different that world is from the one that the rest of us live in. What Miss J said right there is honestly just a very literal description of what comes next in the episode, but it's also the most whimsical, surreal sounding combination of words that I've ever heard anyone string together. Like, if I didn't know any better, I would 100% believe you if you told me that it was actually just like a riddle that someone lifted from a Roald Dahl book or something. As it turns out, though, there's a good reason why Miss J's introduction sounds so whimsical, and that's because the people she was introducing are the two most whimsical people who have ever existed in the history of humanity.
How you ladies doing today? Swirl. Yes. I'm Richard Harris.
And I'm Ron Harris. And we're gonna teach you a swirl.
I've seen many episodes of America's Next Top Model, and each episode is full of a whole host of colorful characters, unlike anyone I've ever met in real life. But without question, these two are my favorite people who have ever appeared on the show.
This morning you learned from Miss J the movement of how to take your gloves off, your jackets.
Today it's about your body movement, making the garment flow. Oh, we can't wait. We're so excited. We taught Tara the swirl. And that's what we're going to do to you today.
Ron and Richard, Count Dracula meets a hairdresser. They're awesome.
Just say gay, Joni. Jesus. Although, that said, she did mention Dracula, so that's a Halloween thing. Does that officially make this a Halloween episode now? As they just explained, they are responsible for teaching Tyra a runway move called the Swirl. And hearing that, I feel like a lot of you probably have a guess at what the Swirl might entail. And then based on that guess, you probably are then thinking something like, well, my guess can't possibly be right because surely Tyra would not have needed two little men to teach her such a move. But as it turns out, no, she did, because the move is exactly what you'd expect it to be.
You are the next top model. Swirl. You're the top model.
A swirl is a movement in the garment.
Like, I'm genuinely not sure how these guys managed to take credit for inventing that, because I'm pretty sure every homosexual boy to ever live has also invented that exact move at the age of 5. Like I usually will give this show the benefit of the doubt that the stuff that they do is a lot harder than it seems, but in this case, there really doesn't seem to be that much to it. Like, don't get me wrong, I would probably fall if I attempted such a move, but I feel like a normal person with fully functioning motor skills could probably figure it out pretty quickly. Which is not to take anything away from the Swirl twins, because I would never. I love them more than my own family. If anything, the fact that their signature move is so mind-numbingly simple makes me even more impressed by them, because, like, I've only now managed to figure out how to monetize the videos I make, and Google sends you an email telling you how to do that. So the fact that they managed to build an entire brand around spinning in little circles and then parlay that brand into an appearance on a national television show leads me to believe that they are two of the greatest business minds to have ever existed. At the very least, they are definitely branding experts, which probably explains why they managed to say the word swirl no less than 18 million times over the course of a 2-minute television appearance.
How you ladies doing today?
Swirl.
A swirl. The swirl.
Swirl. You're the top model.
That's the swirl.
I honestly think these guys might be my idols, I'm not gonna lie. When we're done basking in the glory of the Swirl twins, we head back to the top model house, where Brooke and Nenna get into a screaming match with one another, which is especially fun because I'm fairly certain that neither contestant has spoken in louder than a whisper up until this point in the competition. It all started in last week's episode when Brooke caught Nenna laughing at her terrible commercial while she was being judged, which I admit is honestly pretty obnoxious, but at the same time I feel like I can't really judge Nenna because I think I also laughed at Brooke's commercial. I just didn't get in trouble for it because I was watching through a television several years after the fact, so Brooke probably couldn't see me do it. Unless, of course, she has some sort of superpower that I don't know about. Which honestly, I sincerely hope that she does. Nenna then pushes Brooke to the limit by hogging the phone for hours on end to talk to her terrible boyfriend, leading the two to get into an argument. And by argument, I mean that Brooke tries to express her feelings, and Nenna don't give a fuck.
How can you not understand the concept of the phone?
I didn't see anybody around. Like, I left the door wide open.
It's not that very difficult. And you're a chemist, you can understand all that, but you can't understand the simple concept of a phone.
I'm not at all moved by Brooke's reaction. I really don't care.
And also another thing that has bothered me, you've been telling people
I think it's pretty clear given their interactions that Nenna sees Brooke as someone she can easily dominate. Especially in group situations like this, I feel like there are always people who try to pick out the weak links and assert themselves over them, and I know this because I have been the weak link in literally every group I have ever been a part of. Like me, Brooke definitely gives off sweet, easily dominatable vibes, and so Nenna thinks that she can take advantage of her disposition. But unlike me, Brooke is actually able to stand up for herself, and this leads to her screaming at Nenna in a way that most of us probably wouldn't have expected from her based on what she's shown of herself up until this point.
She is a bitch.
What happened?
I'm like, had it up to here with Nana because everybody thinks she's sweet, everybody thinks she is nice, and she is not.
Brooke? This is coming out of Brooke's mouth. Nana.
She cries every day. It
I
doesn't.
don't cry. You are a bitch, Nana.
I honestly love watching Brooke stand up for herself because even when she's yelling and calling people names, she still honestly seems pretty sweet. Like, I genuinely think that she is very mad at the moment, and I think that it's great that she's able to stand up for herself, but even still, she's giving off the vibe that if Nenna asked her for a ride to the airport 10 minutes later, she'd probably be like, yeah, sure, let me get my coat.
I know I'm supposed to be sweet and nice, but I have a temper, I do.
I feel like people who actually have tempers don't call them tempers, and it seems pretty clear to me that Brooke does not actually have a temper. Like, literally all she does is call Nenna a bitch after being pushed to her limit, which, while maybe not the best way to deal with the situation, is still not really all that intense given how most people would probably react to being put in the pressure cooker that is the top model household. And even though her reaction was relatively mild, she still spends the majority of the rest of her time on the episode feeling bad for losing her temper. When she does finally get her turn on the phone, she uses her time to express regret to her dad for losing it in a way that, again, leads me to believe that she's genuinely a very nice person.
Like, I just hate it here so much.
You're worrying too much.
Well, because I said something I shouldn't have said. I called her a name and I felt so bad.
It's not really like me to be like that. There's just so much other pressures to like deal with, and then that added to it and just being frustrated, and then, you know.
Nenna's not my favorite character on the show, but I don't really hate her in the way that a lot of you guys in the comments seem to. But that said, I do think that she is very clearly the one in the wrong here. Like, I think that she was just kind of acting like a jerk and expecting Brooke not to fight back, so to see Brooke actually get to stand up for herself is honestly pretty cool. Talking about Top Model like I do, there are so many moral gray areas and complex situations that it feels really good to find myself rooting for someone without having to qualify my positions with like 12 minutes worth of discussion about it. It's just nice and clear cut in a way that you don't often get on this show, so rather than prattling on, I think the best thing I can do is just sit back and enjoy while Brooke has her moment.
She's back there whispering, laughing at me. What makes her so much better than me? She's from Africa?
You've been on it for a good. I'm like,
go back to Africa if it's so damn great.
God damn it, why can't things just be nice? In Brooke's defense, I don't think that she meant that in a malicious way. Like, I don't get the sense that she really knows the implications of that phrase at this particular moment in time, and feel like she probably wouldn't have said it if she did. She's also quite young here, and this happened in 2006, so even in the slim chance that she did mean it in a problematic way, there's a good chance that she's grown a lot since then. But still, all that said, just because I don't think that this makes Brooke a terrible person, that doesn't make what she just said okay. Regardless of the context, hearing someone say that about her probably didn't feel that good to Nenna when she was watching this scene back after the fact, and no matter how in the wrong she may have been in this particular fight, there's no situation where she would deserve that. Like, I do genuinely still think that Brooke is probably an extremely nice person who just happened to choose a extremely terrible combination of words to express herself, but this whole situation just feels like proof that it doesn't matter how good of a person you are, there are no clean hands in the world of America's Next Top Model. After Brooke and Nenna's big blowout, the girls get a Tyra mail that says Sachet Shantae, which some of the girls misinterpret as meaning they're about to meet RuPaul.
Caramel says sachet, Shantae. I thought RuPaul, wasn't that like his phrase? Okay, we're gonna be doing drag.
Yes, Leslie, obviously you are. I would argue that you've been doing it since episode 1. I honestly don't know how you haven't realized that yet. Though the girls will undoubtedly be doing drag in their next challenge, it unfortunately has nothing to do with RuPaul. And instead, they will be competing in a church fashion show where they'll have the opportunity to show off that extremely complex twirl technique they learned the day before. More importantly though, it will also give us, the viewers, the opportunity to see how Jade reacts to stepping foot inside of a church.
What could we possibly be doing in a church? But of course I bless myself with the holy water. Dip, 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 dip.
I swear, if holy water didn't burn my skin, I would absolutely do that every time I walked into a church. I love that moment so much. This is honestly one of my favorite challenges of the series because I think it really highlights what makes Top Model so much fun to watch. Like I said earlier, I do think that they are doing drag, but I don't mean it in the weird transphobic way that people on Top Model usually use the term. Instead, I mean that they're doing what I think the best drag performers also do, which is to use clothing and movement and attitude and anything else they can get their hands on to transform themselves into a spectacle, because I do think that creating a spectacle is ultimately what the girls are supposed to do in this challenge, and if that is the case, then they very much succeed. Well, some of them anyway. Sarah, not so much. I don't have particularly good taste in fashion, but I do like to look at clothes if they're loud and crazy enough to keep my ADHD's attention, and the outfits they put the girls in here definitely fit that description. Like, they all look like they've just come from poisoning their wealthy husbands, and the black and white coloring really pops in a way that stands out against the wood and stained glass behind them because, lest you forget, we are still in a church. Even more interesting to my admittedly puerile brain, though, is the fact that most of their outfits are very flowy, meaning that there's a lot of movement to keep me entertained. Honestly, looking at these outfits, the only way they could have been more tailor-made to keeping my attention is if they were all really, really shiny. Like I said, Sarah doesn't do that great, but I don't think it's her fault necessarily. Like, I think she might just be a little bit out of her element here because, technically, I don't think that there's an opposite of a black church fashion show, but if there were one, it would probably be Sarah. She's definitely overthinking it while attempting the twirl here, so what should be a nice fluid movement ends up looking a little bit more like a mechanical glitch.
Swirl and twirl.
I would take 2 steps and I would step on the train. I didn't feel comfortable in it, and I'm sure that showed.
Leslie also doesn't do that great here, but it's not because of anything that she could have changed so much as just the fact that she walks with her butt jutting out.
You walk out there and the energy was just great.
Work it, work it.
And I'll admit that I always giggle at the way Leslie walks, but I also always feel really bad about it because I think that besides her weird runway posture, Leslie is probably one of the stronger models in the competition, and it's hard not to notice the way she walks once it's pointed out to you, but I honestly don't think that I would have picked up on it had Miss J not said something about it a few episodes earlier. Leslie to me is kind of like the model version of a movie you love until someone points out a small plot hole that you never noticed before, and now you can't fully enjoy the movie anymore because all you can focus on is that one stupid little plot hole. On the other side of the spectrum is Jade, who absolutely crushes this challenge. I feel like a lot of people will say that the only reason that Jade is still in the competition is to create drama, but I don't think that those people have ever seen her do this.
I was twirling my butt off, and I'm thinking, Jay, just pull this off.
Jade came out, and he just started turning and twirling and twirling. That's what a community fashion show was all about.
I've never understood how people can go to fashion shows and not get bored out of their minds, but I think that if more of them look like that, I would probably be able to sit through one myself. Like I'd probably still need to check my phone a bunch because I'm not Superman, but I think I could sit through a whole one without feeling like my skeleton was trying to escape through my mouth, and that's how you know something is keeping my attention. For one thing, I firmly believe that Jade should be dressed like that at all times. She looks like if Cruella de Vil had the ability to control an army of snakes, and I've never seen a more perfect combination of clothing and person in my life. Like, honestly, the only thing she's missing is a gigantic cigarette filter, and I assume the only reason she doesn't have one of those is that they didn't want her smoking in a church. Also, I know I've made fun of the swirl technique a lot this episode, but seeing it in action, I totally get it now. Okay, granted, I still don't think the girls needed an entire seminar and 2 identically dressed pixie men in order to learn it, but I do get it. It's very cool on a runway. Unsurprisingly, Jade wins the challenge, and she celebrates by doing the strangest dance I had ever seen until the dance she does later in this episode. Like, I'm not even joking, I've watched this part a bunch of times, and I still don't entirely understand the physics of what's going on here. After the runway challenge, the girls go home and get the laziest Tyra mail in the history of Tyra mails. Like I said earlier in a video, there's always a pun or a riddle or something in the Tyra mail that's meant to hint at what the girls will be doing next, and what they'll be doing next involves crumping, so this was the best that they could come up with, apparently.
Sometimes on the morning of an important job, I used to get really bad stomach cramps, but I still got off my butt and worked it, Tyra. Crumpets?
Wait, she said sometimes she gets stomach cramps.
Stomach cramps.
There are a lot of stupid things that happen on Top Model, but the phrase stomach crumps might just be the dumbest of them all. Like seriously, if you're going to go the cramp route, why not make a joke about like crumping your style or something? Because it's a modeling competition. That would probably make way more sense. Whatever, it's not like I'm bitter that whoever wrote that is closer to writing for TV than I can ever hope to be or anything like that. As that Tyra mail so eloquently hinted, their Photoshop today will involve crumping, which was a style of dance that the producers of Top Model clearly thought was going to be a bigger craze than it actually turned out to be. For those of you who don't know what it is, neither did Twiggy, so I will show you the explanation that Tyra gave her.
Does everybody know what crumping is? Twiggy?
I don't.
Well, crumping is, it's a new type of dancing that's taking over by storm.
It's just crazy movement.
All right, let's do it.
Come on,
Tyra. Go, Tyra. Go, Tyra.
Go, Tyra. Go, Tyra. Go, Tyra. Go, Tyra. Go, Tyra.
Crumping!
Now, Miss
Not
Twiggy.
really. I'm gonna stick to tap dancing, thank you.
I don't know if that explanation really clarified things for any of you, but what I do know is that I would give literally any part of my body to watch Twiggy tap dance. That sounds amazing. They're doing an ad for Payless, so their challenge is to model shoes while doing that dance, which essentially just amounts to flailing around uncontrollably. And then to make sure that the photo shoot makes you question your own sanity, they also brought in a dance troupe of clowns to stand behind them.
We have Tommy the Clown and his Crumpers here today. Tommy!
My favorite part of that clip is that when Jay introduces the clowns, Jade reacts in a way that feels like she's saying like, ugh, knew it. And if that's the case, then like, how does she seem like she totally knows what's going on right now? I feel like the only way to react to the situation they're being presented with is like confusion and abject terror. And like, you would think that Jay introducing a group of dancing clowns would be the silliest moment of the episode, but I actually think that the silliest moment of the episode is when he introduces the photographer.
So to capture this whole scene, I had to get a really cool editorial photographer to give it a little urban edge.
Okay, now based on that introduction, I want you to take a moment to try and picture who the photographer is going to be, okay? So like, take a moment, and now I'm going to show you the full clip.
So to capture this whole scene, I had to get a really cool editorial photographer to give it a little urban edge. His name is Trevor. Trevor coming out here.
How you doing? So I need you to bring Tommy's energy to the pictures.
Yeah, I bet none of you were picturing Trevor, were you? No, of course you weren't. None of us mere mortals could have possibly predicted Trevor, master of urban edge. Which, like, for the record, the reason I find that introduction so funny is not the urban part of it. Like, I'm not like, haha, he said urban and then a white guy showed up, that's so funny. No, a part that I take issue with is the edge part of the introduction. Like, I've never seen a person with less edge than Trevor. He has very sleepy grandma energy. Like he doesn't even have a last name. When it comes time to pose, Sarah looks more out of her element than I have ever seen a person be in my entire life.
So Sarah, keep your chin down, and you can think about showing off your shoe.
Hey, Sarah?
And like, normally here is where I would mock Sarah unnecessarily because I'm an asshole and that's fun for me, but I actually totally get why she's uncomfortable right now. Like I feel like this is another one of those times where it's important for us to take a step back and appreciate just how weird of a situation she's in. She's on a rooftop in downtown Los Angeles, dressed like a Bratz doll, surrounded by a group of clowns and being forced to dance. And then on top of that, she's in the presence of Trevor, which is bound to be intimidating to anyone. I talk a lot of shit on Sarah, but it would take an extremely weird person not to be uncomfortable in this exact moment. And as it turns out, that person is Jade, who is extremely in her element during this challenge.
Dancing is like a fulfillment to the soul for me. Jade can dance.
Jade is extremely excited to dance this week, and that excitement seems to have taken over her nervous system and started controlling her limbs like a marionette, because that is literally the only way to explain the strangeness that is the movements she performs in this shoot.
Go, Jade! There you go! Hey. It's great. It's great energy. Just slow it down just a little bit.
I love everything about that. Like, not only is she flailing like an inflatable man from a used car dealership, but she's also styled like a sexy Bart Simpson, and the combination of that creates some of the most universally perfect visuals I have ever seen in my life. Like I'm not even joking, you could put that in front of literally any sound and it would be perfect. Here it is in front of some public domain ragtime music. Here it is in front of FDR's first inaugural address.
Firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
And here it is in front of complete silence. See, it's still perfect. I love that clip so very much.
Dancing is like a fulfillment to the soul for me. Jade can dance.
As usual, I wanted to do my best to recreate the photo shoot myself, but I wasn't entirely sure how to go about that, so I think what I'm going to do is just crump on camera for about a minute and then use the best screenshot from that I can salvage. Unfortunately, I don't have an army of clowns to dance in front of, but what I do have is this random puppy. So I feel like he'll have to do for now. So yeah, let's get a minute on the clock and Thank God that's over. Okay, a minute was definitely too long for that. I don't think I've ever exercised that hard before in my life. I am not looking forward to rewatching that video when I edit this, I can tell you that much. Where did my tiny hat go? In judging, the girls have another challenge that involves walking the runway, only this time it has an unexpected twist.
This is what I want you to do. Alrighty. Signature walk, signature walk, signature walk. That's my signature walk. Then I want you to get back here, hit this, and turn. As if you are on a turntable. You see how smooth that is? Brilliant. And what I'm checking for is your posture and your balance.
And like, that move Tyra just did there is extremely cool, but she also 100% only included it to flex on the fact that she knows how to do it. Like I have no doubt that Tyra just cornered a producer and was like, look what I can do. Work that into the show. I'm not going to show you any of the girls' attempt at doing the move because obviously none of them do it right because it's not a skill that anyone besides Tyra has, and also the challenge itself doesn't really matter because the girl who goes home tonight was going home regardless of how smoothly she turned on the tips of her toes. That girl is Leslie, and she's eliminated tonight almost entirely because her butt juts out a little bit when she walks, which is a very stupid and shallow reason to eliminate someone from a competition, but that said, the competition she was in is also very stupid and shallow, so it honestly makes a lot of sense. To be honest, I kinda get it. Like, if the competition is to find someone who can be a working model, having a weird runway walk would probably be a huge issue. Like I said before, I didn't even notice it until Miss J pointed it out, but once she did, it became kind of distracting, and I gotta imagine that anyone looking to hire a model in the real world would probably see it as a bit of a deal breaker, regardless of how many other good model qualities she may have. And that honestly must have sucked really bad for Leslie, because like I said earlier, she was otherwise one of the strongest girls in the competition, and I gotta imagine that when she got cast, the fact that her ass sticks out a couple of inches further than where it should when she walks was probably one of the last reasons in the world she thought she would be eliminated. And what makes it suck even worse is the fact that there probably wasn't a lot she could have done to fix it. Like, I gotta imagine that when Miss J pointed it out, Leslie probably did her best to kind of practice not doing it, but the way she walks is probably just the way she walks, and that probably was really hard for her. Like granted, not like homelessness hard, but difficult nonetheless. And honestly, there was a lot of stuff like that in this episode. Like, I feel like I probably could have made a lot more easy jokes about some of the stuff the girls talked about this week, because between the accessories and the swirls, all of their challenges this week really didn't seem very challenging.
The dresses I was wearing was very difficult for myself to walk in, so I was really worried that I was gonna end up tripping.
And part of me wishes I had taken advantage of that low-hanging fruit a little bit more, because my comedy is, if nothing else, extremely lazy, but truth is I didn't want to make those jokes, because regardless of how silly it might sound to say that all that stuff they did this week is difficult, I can honestly see how it would be. Ultimately, what the girls learned about this week wasn't how to take off their gloves or twirl in a circle. What they really learned about was how to do multiple things at one time, and I can honestly sympathize with how difficult that stuff can be. When I started making this series, I wanted to do one thing, make videos about America's Next Top Model, and so I set out to do that, and it only took me about 30 seconds to realize that that one thing was way more than just one thing. Making this show is writing and filming and recording audio, which is something that I still haven't figured out, even though you'd think it would be really easy, what with all the newfangled technology they have now. Kids these days, am I right? It's advertising and making thumbnails and editing, and as I learned today, it's figuring out a goddamn schedule and sticking to it so that I can make seasonal episodes and get them out in a timely manner. And if that wasn't bad enough, all those things I just listed are all 8 million smaller things combined too. Like, take filming for example, because it's not just filming, it's public speaking and reading from a script and doing my best to make it not completely obvious that I'm reading from a script right now. It's knitting and making sure my equipment's all working and trying not to fumble my words and keeping one eye out to the side to make sure Nicholas doesn't sneak up on me and eat my soul. The sad fact of the matter is that a lot of the stuff we do is actually just a bunch of smaller things all at once, and no matter how simple a single task should be, when you actually stop to think about all those smaller things, one single task can start to feel like a lot more than that. I mentioned earlier that I think Miss J's class about how to take off gloves on the runway might have made things harder for the girls, and that's because when you point out the little things, it always makes them bigger. Rather than being a small part of a thing you have to do, they become a thing you have to do all their own, and that just gets you thinking about them more and trying to give them all the attention they deserve, and then they end up being more complicated than if you had just done them without thinking about them. These sorts of things are a lot like a model's ass slightly jutting out as she walks down the runway, you know, a small thing that you might not have noticed, but the moment you do, it actually starts to become a huge distraction. I talked in the beginning of the video about how I'm not sure if I'll be able to get another one out before Halloween, and I'd like to say that my long-ass turnaround time is because my videos are complex works of art that take an extreme amount of time and effort to create, but the sad truth is that most of the time, the reason it takes me so long to finish these damn things is that I get caught up on a bunch of small details that really trip me up. There are always certain jokes I want to include, or ways I want to say things, or details I want to point out, and I end up stuck on trying to make those work for way more than I should, even though they're really not all that important in the grand scheme of things. You have no idea how many times I've rewatched one of my old videos after I've had enough time to distance myself from it and not even notice little things that I spent hours stressing over, trying my best to make work. In hindsight, rather than spending all that time pouring myself into little details trying to make them perfect, I probably could have just skipped over a lot of the stuff and made my life a hell of a lot simpler, because when you finally step back and look at the big picture of what you're trying to do, all that small stuff inevitably starts to feel small again, and it's hard to remember why it felt like a big deal to begin with. There's a famous phrase for this, which is that I can't see the forest for the trees, and there's a reason why that phrase is so well known, and that's because if I had to guess, I'm not the only person that it applies to. And it makes a lot of sense, you know, because trees can seem huge, but in the grand scheme of a forest, they really ain't that much. And as tempting as it can be to try and check every last little tree, it's not really worth getting lost in a forest to do so. Although that said, since this is supposed to be a Halloween episode, maybe I should get lost in the forest and it's all like dark and spooky and shit, and the trees have branches that look like monster claws, and there's one creepy crow on there that's all like caw, caw, caw. That was a stretch, wasn't it? And yeah, here's the part of my video where the writer in me wants to tie it all back to Halloween like I said I was going to in the beginning. And believe me when I tell you that I tried really, really hard to do that. Like, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to talk about how scary it can be getting lost in the details, or thinking about ways that the small stuff is like an army of zombies or some shit. But at the end of the day, maybe the best thing for me to do is just let myself be okay with the fact that I'm doing a little bit less this time. Everything we do is already a million little things at once, so maybe every now and then it's alright to make your life a whole lot easier by letting yourself do 999,999 things and trusting that the one little detail you're skipping over won't seem that big in the long run. Rather than struggling to try and make something small and unimportant work, it's okay sometimes to just do one less thing, you know? It kind of reminds me of another famous phrase that I just made up just this moment. Sometimes you have to remove your Freddy Krueger glove before you can try to knit. I can't imagine that one is going to be quite as popular as the Forest for the Trees one, but it does make some good points nonetheless. And yeah, I guess this isn't really a Halloween episode, but rather than spinning my wheels trying to turn it into one, maybe I can just cut my losses and make my life easier by not stressing the small stuff. And if I do that, then maybe I can get this out quick enough that I can maybe get my next video out in time for Halloween. That, or I will put out a very spooky Thanksgiving episode, but whichever way it happens, it really doesn't matter in the long run. If you like spooky Thanksgiving themed content, then please subscribe and like and comment and turn on notifications, I think. I saw someone say that on here, so I figured I should say it too. And also, feel free to check out my other old show, which is about Halloween stuff. It's called The Spooky Show, and if you like this show, I think you'll like it. I'll link to that at the end of the video. And other than that, I don't have anything to say besides see you later, nitwits, and happy Halloween. Unless I get a better Halloween episode up in time. I don't know. Anyway, see you later. Goodbye.